Hey everybody! In this video I want to talk about the assignment in which I ask you to write an original science fiction story. This assignment was inspired by students in my other literature and composition classes who always ask, oh, can we write a story in this class? And it's never really appropriate, I kind of have to say no, but I love writing stories, I'm a writer myself, and I think it's really fun. I also think it's a revealing way to understand what the authors we read go through. Having the experience, just a little experience, of trying to write something yourself, I think gives you some empathy and some insight into the authors that we've read. So those are the two reasons why I decided to have you write an original science fiction story in this course. Keep in mind that this is a literature course, and I'm not grading you on your creative writing. If you complete this assignment, you get credit for it. There's no worries about doing a bad job or me critiquing your work harshly or anything like that. This is just an experiential assignment. I want you to have the opportunity to try it out. So I also thought it might be kind of helpful to give you some examples and some ideas and some techniques that will help you be more successful in your attempt to write a story. And I'm taking these examples from the stories that we've read so far in this course. So the first bit of advice I would give you if you're writing a short science fiction story is to keep it pretty short. You don't want to come up with an idea that is more like the idea for a novel. Remember there's that silly metaphor about an iceberg. The silly metaphor about the iceberg is that, you only see the top of it and most of it is below the water. It's a good metaphor. I shouldn't call it silly, but it's just kind of overdone, I guess. In any case, that's kind of how a short story is. You can think of a whole world, but you only need to show the reader a little bit of that world in your short story. So don't come up with an idea for a novel. You don't want to have civilizations clashing. You don't want a person to land on a new planet and have to learn an entire new culture. You want something that can fit in the space of a short story. So, for example, the crew of the Gum landing on the planet and the interactions that they have trying to determine the source of the consciousness that Osden is picking up. It's just one small episode in those characters' lives. It's not what Osden had going on when he was growing up. It's not what happened later. It's just what happens when they get to that planet and the little bit of time approaching the planet. If we think about Bloodchild, it's the moment when Tigatoy is going to make Gan in Tlik, is going to lay her eggs in Gan. And if we think about Mother of Invention, it's the moment when Anwuli is going to have her baby and her house OB3 needs to save her. The focus of the story should be pretty small in the scope and span of time. That's something you can think about. Try to write a story that doesn't take place over a long period of time, and you'll be more likely to fit it into a short story format. My next bit of advice is to focus on your main character. Really try to make a realistic person. Don't necessarily try to think about whole, worlds, civilizations, giant things. Think about a real person and what they might go through if they were put in a really extraordinary situation. Think about a regular person and how they might act if they were given technology that was very different or just different than what we have now. So, for example, I'm thinking again of Roadside Picnic, where the people are exposed to incredible alien technology and they steal it and they sell it on the black market. Or in Mother of Invention, the house can do all these amazing things, but it can't straighten out these people's interpersonal relationships. That's a good way to think about the story, is to think about it as revealing something about the character, maybe even more than revealing something about the world that you're building. That brings me to point number 3, which is world building. World building is the practice of science fiction and fantasy writers in which they set the parameters of the story. What exists in this story? When is the time period? What are the things that the characters can and can't do? What are the capabilities of the technology that they encounter? What are the traits of the alien species that they encounter? These are the elements of world building. If we go back to the iceberg, a lot of that world building will be below the surface. And you just need to show readers what's going on in this world as it exists. You don't need to explain every detail of why it's happening. Just show the reader. That's a old writer bit of knowledge that you may have heard, show, don't tell, which is just show what's happening in the story and the reader will figure out the parameters. The reader will figure out why it's happening. Another bit of advice I would give is make sure that your story has a strong turning point. You want to make sure that there's a point in the story where the character has to make a serious decision, when something changes, when something happens, when Gon has to put the gun down and agree to have this ceremony with Tiga Toy. You have to think about the moment when Osden disappears and isn't coming back. You want to think about the moment when the stars start going out in 9 billion names of God. Have something that changes. Have something profound that happens in the character's life that makes them think about the world in a different way. Because if you do that, then the reader will also have the experience of being able to think of the world in a different way. Science fiction is very creative. Have fun with it. If you want to write a story about time travel that's also a comedy, great, write that. If you want to come up with a whole bunch of new words that your reader has to try to tackle, as long as you can make them understandable in context, go for it. Whatever you can think of as a piece of technology that could really evolve out of the technology that we have now and how it would change our lives if it did, let's read about that too. As you're writing the story, remember that your imagination is going to be interesting to someone no matter what. We're not submitting these stories for a contest. We're not trying to publish them in a magazine or on a website or in a book. We're not even going to get a grade on this. As long as you complete the assignment, you'll get credit for doing it. The stakes are very low. Writing is a fun activity. It's not a competitive activity. It's something where you get to enjoy and use your imagination. Think back to when you were a kid and you could run around outside and act out your imagination. Now you can do it by describing the things that go on in that part of your brain to your readers and sharing your imagination with people in that way. So I highly encourage you to have fun with this assignment. I really look forward to reading what you come up with.